Can I get in?
Give it another minute because we keep getting beeps.
I don't know what. Double signed in or something.
Cheryl, I can hear you. Just FYI.
Thank you. I'm having trouble, obviously. I can't, my mic's off and my camera's off. I'm going to sign back in. I'm going to leave.
Well, that's weird. We can see you and hear you. All right. It has officially slowed down. And now that it's a little past 12, I think we'll go ahead and get the meeting moving along. Just as a reminder, if you could please mute when you're not speaking, that would be great. And we ask, particularly when we're online or particularly in person, that you identify yourself and organization before you speak. It helps with the meeting minutes. And a reminder for anyone not on the board that the polling, if used, is reserved generally for board members. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order at 12:02 and start the roll call. Cheryl Kashuba.
I'm here. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Back. Great. Dr. Bogan?
Good afternoon.
Avon.
It's
Okay.
Avon on behalf of Dr. Bogan, yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Avon. Joel Hopkins.
I'm here.
Great. Antoinette Kraus.
Here, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Amy Lowenstein.
Yes, hello.
Hello. Alexis Miller.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
I thought I saw you. Yeah, there you are. Hey, Alexis. Dr. Conti.
Dr. Conti won't be in attendance. I'm her proxy today. This is Cheryl.
Proxy to Cheryl. Yep, I'm seeing it now. Sorry about that. Secretary Arkush is proxy to Carl Feldman. Carl, are you on?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Colleen Kavanaugh.
Here as well. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. And Tia Whitaker.
Present.
Very good. That makes everyone accounted for in person or via proxy. So the next order of business is to review and approve the minutes. They were distributed for sets of minutes from March 12th, 2025 and April 10th, 2025 meetings of the board. I look for a motion to approve.
This
This
is
is
Antoinette.
Cheryl,
I'll
so
make the
moved.
motion.
I heard
second,
Cheryl make the motion, so we'll give the second to Antoinette. Any discussion of the meeting minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We'll keep moving along. This is the time in the meeting where we have an opportunity for public comment. It's required by the Sunshine Act, so we provide it here at the beginning. To ensure the orderly progress, all comments should be directed to the chair and should be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Questions asked to the chair or the board may or may not be addressed at the meeting. Do we have anyone, if you could raise your hand, that you'd wish to speak? Seeing none, we will move right along. Devin, it has been one heck of a week and a half in Washington, and want to turn it to you to kind of walk us through some updates.
Yeah, thank you. So on the first slides here, wanted to just talk a bit about what we have been seeing over the past couple of weeks at the federal level. If you go to the next slide, there's keep going. There we go. A few different buckets of activity that we want to talk with all of you about and provide some updates on what we are hearing. So the one that we have talked extensively about in the board meeting are the enhanced tax credits that expire at the end of this year. We are hearing that the most likely vehicle, if it is going to be extended in any form or being considered to be extended, would be the government funding bill at the end of September. We do not have any indications at this point that it will be included in that, but that is certainly the kind of one remaining vehicle after reconciliation that it could be considered in. If there were any changes made to the expiration, noting that that would be 1 month before open enrollment begins on November 1st. So we will talk in the next few slides in a few minutes about the different contingency planning we are doing to potentially account for changes to that expiration at various times at the end of this year. So that is the one piece that we're tracking. I will note from the last board meeting, there was discussion around starting to communicate to consumers so that they could start planning ahead for these potential cost increases, which, as a reminder, will be on average 82% for our current enrollees. And we have already been hearing that there are people who are saving up, trying to save up money for if their premiums increase at the beginning of next year so that they can keep their coverage. And we've heard from other people who do not think they can accommodate any increase in their coverage, that is making them think more about what medical services they may need if they end up having to drop coverage before the beginning of next year. So, are working on those communications to consumers to make sure that they have full information to work from. The other area that we are tracking is the CMS regulation. We submitted the letter from Pennie raising concerns with several of the policies that would potentially go into effect if they are finalized. The largest and most immediate impact would be the shortening of the open enrollment period. So our open enrollment from the beginning of Pennie has been November 1st to January 15th. And the proposed rule would shorten that for all states to end on December 15th. So November 1st to December 15th, 45 days. That is concerning to us because that combined with the potential disruption in premiums would mean that we would have a much shorter time to provide support for our largest enrollment to date to manage through those changes. It would condense our ability to provide customer support and the capacity of our assisters and our brokers to do the same. So we are watching that. I will note that one change that has happened is that the House of Representatives and the Energy and Commerce Committee did include the provisions of the proposed rule in their bill. So that would codify the changes, make them law, not regulation. And so those are currently in that package to be codified and permanently put into effect. And also noting the other main provision that is concerning in that regulation and now in the legislation is that it also increases cost to consumers. It has more costs in the premiums that are shifted to consumers. It also increases the out-of-pocket costs for consumers. So the other part that has also emerged over the past couple of weeks to add on to these other areas are other policies that we are considering, that we are hearing are under consideration by Congress. And wanted to talk about a couple that we have seen. So one that
Devin,
came out, yes.
Devin, just real quick before you jump there, can you remind us if you have this number? I think the proposed reg, Socio acknowledges, ends up in a reduction of people enrolled through exchanges. Do we know what that number looks like either nationally or obviously they wouldn't have provided it for Pennsylvania specifically, but what was that number nationally? Do you remember?
Yeah, in the proposed rule, they estimated between 750,000 and 2 million people would lose coverage under the proposed rule policies alone. And the enhanced tax credits expiring, I believe CBO has estimated that to be around 5 or 6 million people who would also lose coverage.
So between the two, if they continue to move, you're talking 7-8 million people across the country. And certainly we know substantial numbers of Pennsylvanians as well. Okay. Before Devin moves to the other pieces that they're hearing, does anyone have any questions to this point on kind of what Devin had been reporting on?
This is Amy. I mean, I would be interested along the lines of what you were mentioning, Commissioner Humphreys, is whether there's any modeling for the impact on Pennsylvania yet.
So I will not, well, I'll say this, we don't have exact modeling, but what I can say is that we've been, for the enhanced tax credit portion alone, assuming a 30% reduction, because that would in essence take us back to the level of enrollment before the enhanced tax credits went into place. We recently updated data that we were looking at this past open enrollment, where we looked at the subset of consumers who had the largest premium increases. And after essentially the non-paid termination window, which is the first couple of months of this year, we wanted to see ultimately how many dropped. And that number was 25%. So we think that supports, and that was still in this environment where there are more tax credits available. So we think to say 30% if the enhanced tax credits go away would drop coverage is reasonably aligned with the experience that we're seeing so far. And that's just on the cost increases. You know, with the regulation further increasing costs, that could exacerbate that, as well as the multiple additional process barriers that are being proposed to be put into place for people to maintain their coverage.
And Devin, just putting that into the real person numbers, that's like what, 110, 130,000 Pennsylvanians coming off of Pennie?
150.
150. Wow. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay.
I
Other
would say
questions? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Devin.
I would just say we were thinking of that as potentially a maximum. Now I think with the other provisions, starting to think of that perhaps more as a minimum, just because the regulatory ones and then these other policies that are coming out, I think could exacerbate what we're anticipating.
That's right. Other questions for Devin up to this point?
Commissioner Joel Hopkins, and I'm not sure if this is more for Devin or perhaps you, but with the way that the rate filings were being done with and without the premium tax credits, have you seen anything there that sways your thinking one way or the other? So are you seeing rates coming in and saying, gee, maybe that's not going to be as bad as we thought? Are you factoring it into those numbers? Just trying to figure out how that plays into your calculus.
I think that calculus is pre-rate. So I don't know that it had a estimate on where the rate filings would be versus where they've come in this week. I've had only kind of an initial opportunity to take a peek, but the rates typically don't come public for another probably 2 months. But I think it's pre, and I think, Joel, to your point, and look around kind of nationally, you saw a lot of carriers that raised some concern about costs increasing towards the end of last year in terms of inpatient, outpatient, and drug utilization costs. So the idea being that trend may be picking up fairly significantly. So if those rates come in as high as I think some have suggested, I think that's another factor that would play into the calculation. Devin,
Thank you.
did you have anything additional on that point? I know you obviously don't see our rates right. Okay. All right, Devin, I know I cut you off just to hit on this piece before moving into some of the other moving pieces. So let's move into some of those other ones.
Yeah, so we have seen some additional policies coming out in the last week or so from the House efforts in both the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Ways and Means Committee, and wanted to talk about sort of 2 policies that we're hearing in that respect. So, you know, as I mentioned, they are codifying the regulation in the one part of the bill. In the other one, there are a couple of other provisions. One removes the cap on what someone pays back if they projected their income incorrectly. So right now at lower incomes, they only owe back, you know, up to a certain amount of that tax credit if they say they said their income was going to be 30,000, but throughout the year, they got more hours, they got a new job that paid a little bit more and made 40,000. There is currently a cap if they received ultimately too much tax credit. They would remove that cap, sort of having the consumer need to pay back the full amount based on any misestimates of income. One that I think is we did not have a lot of pre-awareness of that in the Ways and Means is something called pre-enrollment verification. So this, I think, could have a potentially very significant impact on our program. It would change a lot of what we do today regarding verification to ensure eligibility. So right now, what we do is a consumer provides information. We check it in real time against federal data sources, IRS, Department of Homeland Security for immigration status, SSA for citizenship, et cetera. And we allow people to get coverage. And if there is a discrepancy between what they provided on the application and what the data source says, they have 90 days to address that. And then we update their eligibility and enrollment based on that outcome. So what is being proposed in the new legislation that we're seeing is that you would not be able to receive tax credits until all of the documentation is provided. And it also, the language is a bit unclear, but also implies that the data sources could not be relied upon. It would have to be information from the consumer, which is unclear what the intent is there, because the data sources, for example, Homeland Security is a source of truth on immigration, and we already verify eligibility directly with the source of truth. So this appears to be adding in a pretty significant step across all these eligibility criteria that we already verify, that prevents people from getting tax credits until there is verification directly from them. And many times, again, duplicative of the verification that we get directly from the data sources. This would also prohibit passive re-enrollment. So as many of you know, automatic re-enrollment has been a hallmark of the program since it started. It consistent with industry standards. This has been just a standard practice of how we roll coverage over year to year. Each year during auto renewals, we check all the data sources for key eligibility criteria to make sure people are still eligible. And again, people have a window of opportunity to provide documents if that information looks to be inconsistent. This would not allow that practice moving forward. That would require, again, every consumer to come in and re-verify or provide verification of eligibility criteria, again, that we already verify, before they are allowed to receive tax credits. So I think this could have a significant impact on enrollees, because this is not something that enrollees have had to do before. It could incur significant costs operationally, because we need to handle a lot more verification. Again, that is duplicative of verification we already do. And it presents a significant barrier to maintaining coverage for people who have already been verified to be eligible and qualified to receive the coverage and tax credits that they have. So that is one that I just wanted to share, that because that policy, I think, has not gotten a lot of attention, a lot of light, but it could be very significant change to how the marketplace is operated for, again, since it started, to the detriment of consumers, as it would add in duplicative and very burdensome procedures across the board to verify eligibility, again, in a way that we already verify in a much more streamlined approach. So wanted to share an update on that. Are there any questions on that? Again, the language is a bit convoluted when we're reviewing it, but those are sort of the key takeaways that we have from that proposal that was passed out of the Ways and Means Committee and is currently in that package of bill being considered by the House.
Devin, do we know how, like, the financial administrative impact on Pennie from an operations perspective? If we had to do all of this for 2026, I assume there's a cost. I mean, some of it might be built into our existing contracts, but have we looked at that at all?
Yeah, there would certainly be a cost. It's probably worth noting that pre-enrollment verification the timing on that is not 2026. I believe it would take effect in 2028, so we would have more time. but all of these would incur costs. We are still working on quantifying what that would be. Some of the technical components, especially for things this year, like shifting an enrollment date, isn't necessarily the hardest part, but the operations behind that, the increased strain on all of our customer service resources and trying to make those still readily available to people, all of those are operational burdens and costs to Pennie. But we have not quantified that yet.
Thanks. Other questions for Devin on these other pieces moving?
So I'll also flag, we are hearing too that there's discussion around cost sharing reductions. So taking people back to 2017, cost sharing reductions were reimbursed by the federal government to insurers. That stopped. And then, now there have been a variety of changes in reaction to that, including silver loading and those adjustments. So if cost sharing reductions were funded now, it would actually be a cost savings to the federal government. But it could result in a disruption of sort of shifting back to that approach. And it could mean less purchasing power for people in terms of the tax credits that they receive. So that one's, a bit kind of complicated in that it's kind of reverting back to a pre-status potentially. And really, I think we need to see what that actually looks like. There's no specific language on that yet, but just wanted to flag that we're hearing that one as well. So a couple more thoughts before we wrap up on this slide. A lot of collectively, the impact of these is that it's making it more expensive for Pennie enrollees, less valuable in terms of financial protection and higher out-of-pocket costs, and harder to enroll. I think it's interesting that, a lot of this is budget driven or appears to be budget driven, and many of the savings that are being counted for these provisions are not necessarily because there's an underlying improvement to our healthcare system or anything like that. It's savings strictly based on the assumption that more process, more steps, more consumer burden will mean fewer people complete that process to enroll. So, I think to us, that means fewer insured, fewer people who can get coverage through Pennie. And as that uninsured number increases, that's impacts to hospitals, impacts to the health of our populations. We hear often from our small business owners who are enrolled through Pennie that if their insurance premiums go up, that's money that they are pulling from their small business that they currently invest in their small business to cover more of their healthcare costs. So there's that kind of local economic impact as well. And then finally, I wanted to mention the kind of how this works with all of the potential Medicaid changes. So obviously there is a lot of discussion around the Medicaid provisions in these different bills. And, I think what we have been working to clarify is that when you look at the marketplace provisions and you look at the Medicaid ones, it's really a double effect. One misconception that I will just share here, because I think it will behoove all of us to help clarify it if we hear it. There have been some comments of, if someone's not eligible for Medicaid under different rules, they could go get coverage through the marketplace. Under our current eligibility, under the current law, that is not an option. So anyone could get coverage through the marketplace if they're eligible without tax credits. But in many cases, if we're talking about people below, making less than $20,000 a year, full price coverage is not going to be affordable. To get the tax credits, we cannot go below certain income. So if someone, below $20,000 is not found eligible for Medicaid, either because they didn't provide documents for Medicaid, which is the case now, that we receive some denials for that reason, or because of new provisions or criteria around Medicaid eligibility. A denial for Medicaid because of those would not allow them to come to the marketplace and get tax credits. The eligibility is mutually exclusive. It really would not allow us to kind of pick up that population with affordable coverage. And so I just wanted to highlight that we are hearing some confusion with policymakers around how these programs interact, and are really trying to clarify that if changes happen on the Medicaid side and changes happen on the marketplace side, the impact is not mitigated. It's a double impact. It is making coverage harder to get and more expensive across the whole threshold, or the whole continuum. So just wanted to mention that in case anyone hears similar or the same or has the opportunity to provide clarification on that, because I think we are hearing, again, some confusion around how these two programs interact. So any questions on that piece or any of the other topics that we've covered?
Devin, this is Amy. I'm sorry, I would have raised my hand, but I like suddenly forgot how to do that. Yeah, on that piece, I think I know you were talking about not being able to provide tax credits below 100% of poverty, but also the Medicaid changes would make it so that if you weren't eligible for Medicaid because of the work requirements, you also couldn't get tax credits no matter what, whether you return 138 of poverty too. So I just wanted to flag that. Double whammy. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Other questions or thoughts? Okay, not seeing any. I think we could keep moving, Devin.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how we are planning for these potential changes. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick Bradley, our Director of IT, and he's going to talk through some of the discussions we are having on the system side to potentially plan for some of these changes. So Rick, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Devin. Good afternoon. First, we want to just do a quick refresher just to put everybody in the right frame of mind before we talk about what we're planning to do or the strategies we're going forward with as far as the EPTCs are concerned. So the first thing we want to talk about is auto renewals and just kind of walk through that process as a reminder one more time. Auto renewals, of course, is a very complex thing that we have going on prior to open enrollment. On an average, we do about 97.5%, which puts us at about 480,000 auto renewals are done. And that's at the start, very beginning of open enrollment. It is a process where we go through and we will look at eligibility, we'll look at their federal poverty level, we'll look at the income and do that series of verifications. We run it prior to open enrollment. We do it in the staging environment in early September to give us a chance to do some reviews, some checkouts. We do a final run completed usually in the mid to late October timeframe. And then notices are always sent at the beginning of November. It creates that renewable application to re-enroll members in their plans for the upcoming year. If there are any eligible, we look at renewal of the APTC credits. It is a lengthy process, requires a lot of diligent work on review and multiple checkpoints that we have before we actually go through and do the production run. And then, as we said, a majority of our enrollees do not actively shop and they stay in whatever that auto-renewed plan is. So it's a great time savings for us, time savings for the consumers. Now, the concern that comes up is if there's any change in that auto-renewal process, including schedule, it increases our risk and potential delays and creates a certain level of complexity. And that's where we're going to walk into the next slide to talk about what are those options and how the EPTC tax credit expiration can impact us as far as auto renewal is concerned. So so if we just walk right into that next screen, there are 4 options that we're looking at to consider as far as what could happen. And we have no crystal ball. We're not exactly sure which of these is actually going to take place. So we're always starting off with one that we think is going to be more likely than the others. The 4 scenarios we have is the first is, of course, EPTC expire. They're not going to be renewed at all. They're not going to come back at any given time. That's the default configuration that we're working towards, thinking that that's the most likely scenario we're going to see. And so what's going to happen is from a technology standpoint, it's relatively easy for us. What we just basically do is remove the EPTC from the option year 2026 in August, and then just process using the old APTC tables. And the auto renewal process will continue to run. It will just, of course, reflect that there are no enhanced tax credits that are going to be offered. The other options that we are looking at, EPTCs could be extended during auto renewal. So while we're going through this process, we've already generated our first set. They decide to grant either an extension or a certain percentage of the EPTCs. What we would have to do in that case is we'd have to stop, do another auto renewal run, try to catch up, see how things are. We could delay it or run a second one and try to work that out. For the most part, right now, as I said, we're moving through that first option. So if they extended it in later in the cycle before open enrollment, we may have to do a second auto renewal run. The other two options could be the EPTCs would be extended before open enrollment, but after the auto renewal period, so sometime between November and December. And then the fourth option is just they get renewed sometime in 2026. And in 2026, that creates a little bit of a difficulty for us to figure out how we go back and look at and redo all of the calculations for the EPTCs for that given current year. So those are the ones we've kind of brainstormed on, came up with, started to look at how we would address them. Again, from a technology standpoint, it really is not that difficult to either turn them on or turn them off. What it would require, though, is the complexity of either running a second auto renewal or stopping in the middle of auto renewals, or just sometime in 2026 getting information about redoing what we had already set up for the starting period of open enrollment in 2026. So we continue to look at those as options. We continue to look for which ones are going to happen. And as I said, the one that we are proceeding forward with hopefully not having to execute upon, but proceeding forward is that the EPTCs will just expire and move into using the old calculations and making sure and verifying that these old calculations still work, and then analyzing the impact to our consumers. Questions from anybody on that?
Yeah, Tia.
I don't really have a question, but we've seen year over year the consumers are receiving multiple notices and are becoming more and more confused when it comes to the auto enrollment or re-enrollment process. And I think in this current environment, as we're looking at these scenarios, that it would be beneficial for Pennie to work with the insurers when it comes to the timing of their notices as well.
Yes, very good point. That's one of the key things throughout this whole process, and you'll see it in the note at the bottom of here. Communication is going to be very important, important in this form of emails, notices, text, outgoing dialing, any kind of banner alerts, website pop-ups. So there's a variety of communications that we're going to have in place to continue to keep folks educated on what's going on and understanding the impact. So hopefully we will not have to go with multiple renewal notices, just one, but at least keeping those communication lines open with the different means of or mediums that we have and keeping them informed as we make our way through the process.
So Richard, today, just building on Tia's question. So I think the last slide said beginning of November is when the Pennie would send its outreach. So I guess that's probably via email, or is that text? And then the company follows up after that. Is that kind of the touch points, or am I thinking about that wrong?
I'm sorry, sir. I don't quite.
Yeah, so I can speak to that one. So usually what happens, we have a few notices that we send specifically. So we have the auto renewal notice that goes out pretty much at the end of October. It's normally the last few days of October that we send that. We also have the eligibility determination notices.
What's that one say? What's like, can you, as you go through the schedule, can you just briefly tell us what each one like would say to, at least conceptually?
Yeah, so the auto renewal notice is probably the broadest in terms of details that it provides. It essentially says that you have been re-enrolled in the plan that you had the previous year. It doesn't give a lot of details in terms of APTC amounts or things like that. Then in early November, and it's normally the first week of November, but it could be the tail end of that first week, the consumer receives their eligibility determination notice. The eligibility determination notice will say, here's your eligibility for each member of your household. That will actually explain the APTC amounts that they would be provided. The thing worth noting, though, kind of to Tia's point, the insurers also send notices out, and I believe the notices they send, and this is kind of a point where there's been some issues in the past because they send notices and prepare the notices before we actually have the 834s finalized through the auto renewal process. So what that means is they ordinarily have to guess what the previous year's APTC amount would be, and it's not the actual APTC amount that consumer will have in the year in question. Our notices with the eligibility determination notice does give the correct APTC amount, but because of the timeline that the insurers have to use, they don't always have the correct APTC amount when they're issuing that notice at the very beginning of November. And T, I'm assuming that's probably where you're saying that we're seeing some confusion, where they might be saying, you know, why am I getting this notice that's saying a different APTC amount, and then the notice from Pennie is giving the concrete APTC amount for the next plan year.
Yes, and the amount of notices that some of them receive,
Yeah.
especially if they decide to go in and shop early November. They've already received one from their insurer, they're receiving one from Pennie, and then they're receiving another one from a selection that they may have made. So it just becomes overwhelming and confusing for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So every time they update their application and select a new enrollment, they would get another eligibility determination notice and subsequent notices as a result.
Rob, is the insurer timeline with the potentially inaccurate APT? That's something they don't have a choice or flexibility in the timing, right? They have to go.
And that's something we've actually been discussing internally. So we're trying to see how much flexibility we do have with that in terms of what is required to be issued on that first notice they send. So I think they still would have to send a notice, but we're trying to look into where we might have parameters to remove some of what the content would have to be. And that's where we try to look to see if they don't have to include the APTC amount, say, especially with this year being how confusing it will be to see such a drastic change in the subsidized amount that the consumers will be receiving.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think if we're, again, because especially if we're anticipating the shortened open enrollment, we're crunched on every end of the timing spectrum. So I think this year we're just gonna have to do our best to prioritize clear consumer communication, not try to avoid conflicting information coming out, and really looking, as Rob said, at the flexibilities we have to make sure that we're not setting consumers up to receive conflicting information, kind of knowing that this timeline could be very condensed with last minute changes going through.
Any other questions? All right. Evan, I think it's back to you.
Yep. All right, so we are also planning contingency planning on the budget side. So wanted to talk through a bit of what some of this coverage loss would mean for our budget and therefore our program operations. So, as we talked about in the first slide about all these various federal policies, our best guess at this point, given all of the moving pieces, is that the coverage losses could be upwards of 30%, starting pretty early in 2026, coming out of this open enrollment period. As we know, our operating revenue comes primarily from enrollment-based user fees. So with a 30% coverage loss prediction, Pennie's user fee revenues would also potentially decrease by up to 30%, again, starting as early as January. Now, we know many variables can impact that, from where the rates land, where the affordability policies land, and what level of coverage people choose based on all of those changing factors. So again, as Rick said, we don't have a crystal ball, but we are trying to be diligent in planning and do our due diligence and planning ahead for what a scenario could look like if our enrollment is impacted to this extent. Also, as a reminder, we do receive around $15 to $19 million a year in federal funding through DHS for the Medicaid-related activities that we undertake as the marketplace. So we also are contingency planning for the potential that this could be reduced or eliminated. We have not heard anything to that extent, but given the broader conversations and sort of lack of clarity around where all of these federal policies will lie, we are also contemplating that as a scenario for the purposes of planning. Next slide. So if the 30% revenue reduction were to occur, we would be operating pretty much immediately at an operational, sort of a structural deficit of $30 million a year, or $2.5 million each month. If the federal funding, worst case scenario, if that were eliminated, that would increase the structural deficit to $45 million a year, or $3.75 million a month. So our approach in this case would be that we would, should these changes occur and this worst case scenario occur, we would need to undertake a pretty expansive rebudgeting process where we would need to reduce our costs. We would need to reevaluate, the reinsurance contribution and our contracts to try to get ourselves to a point where we could be financially self-sustaining again. That would be incredibly difficult to do immediately. The one piece of good news we have, I know I've been sharing a lot of bad news. The one piece of good news is that we do have the carryover and reserve funds. Currently that's around $100 million. And so that would allow us to basically buy ourselves time to reconfigure our operations and reconfigure our budget to become self-sustaining in the long term through significant cost reductions across the entire program. Of course, that would be a conversation that we would have options and details around that should it happen with this board, and receive full buy-in and vote on all of those options when the time comes. But that would really mean that we would need essentially every penny of the reserves that we have accrued at this time to get us through the time it would take for us to become self-sustaining again at a lower cost point. So we, again, would be looking at a very significant structural deficit, and we would be able to maintain financial viability for a period of time by using the carryover and reserve funds. It's important to note that the carryover and reserve have been developed or accrued under very unique circumstances that will not continue moving forward. It was from higher than expected enrollment, which for all the reasons we've talked about is not expected to continue. It's also been because the reinsurance program has come under budget consistently. And as we will get to later in this presentation, that is also no longer the case, and we actually came over budget this year. So our carryover and reserve funds, we are viewing them as sort of fixed where they are, and really essential and a critical lifeline for us to be able to get through all of these potential changes and the impacts they would have to our program over the coming years. So I wanted to note that, again, really this is both trying to lay the groundwork for some, potentially very tough conversations we'll have to have early next year about how we have that long-term financial viability, but also sharing the very thin silver lining that we are in a position to give ourselves some time to make some of those changes because of our reserve funds.
Antoinette, I see a question. And then Joel.
I think we hit on this point earlier, but at a time we're going to be looking to reduce costs, isn't it also safe to say, and we probably need to do modeling if all the other provisions go into effect, that Pennie will also at the same time then have to deal with increased costs for a lot of this too? So it's kind of we'll lose revenue, have to decrease costs, but then also have to increase costs in other areas to meet all of the requirements. Is that safe to say?
Yeah,
we need to think about it.
No, I mean, it is true. We don't know the dollar amounts yet, but some of the bigger changes would require pretty significant technology changes, some of the ones being contemplated, for example, in the House bill. And then on the other side of how we are supporting people going through this, if we want to provide high levels of customer service, that would certainly increase costs. If we are cutting those at the same time these drastic changes are going into place, it's really going to impede our ability to help guide people through that and get people the answers and information they need to make the best decisions given all the changes. So it's really going to hamper our ability to do that if we're trying to cut costs while also trying to guide people through all the disruptions.
Joel?
Devin, obviously I support and understand the use of the reserve funds. That's what they're there for this exact type of a scenario. Have you, though, already started planning? So, for example, looking at variable costs and saying, okay, if the worst case scenario hits, then day one, here are some things we can do. In other words, I'm just want to make sure that the timing, it's not, hey, let's wait to find out and then we'll start planning, but you're actually starting to plan now for that scenario so that if and when the worst case scenario hits, we are prepared and we're starting to pull whatever levers are available to reduce costs.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have already started identifying what is more variable, what has less time associated with making changes, so we could potentially start doing that sooner and extend the ability of us to rely on our carryover a little bit more. Those are things that have downsides to them, like outreach. We in a time when potentially outreach is more important than ever, because that would be how we would still find a maybe smaller group that can continue to afford and want coverage. Harder to find them given the affordability barriers. But we would, potentially, that would be something we potentially do quicker, but would also have a downside to it. So we are looking at those things. And I think the other piece is that most of our bigger costs do take longer to change. So for example, with reinsurance, we set our contribution to that years in advance. And so, for the cost next year, which we had budgeted at 50 million, we set that a year ago. And so we're sort of, have some of these costs that are baked in essentially from, that were made for decisions that were made a long time ago before all these pieces were coming into play. Similarly, with the call center, that's one of our next biggest costs. We've had conversations around, and we are looking at ways we could potentially ensure we have more flexibility on that, but that would take time as well, because that's currently a contract that runs out for a little bit more time here. So I think some of the bigger costs take longer to make changes on.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Devin on this slide?
Hey, Devin, this is Cheryl. Just following up on what you just said. Do we have any flexibility with the call center vendor to modify in a shorter time frame, or do we have to let the contract play out? I don't know how much we're locked in.
We're looking at sort of all the different options, and last time we talked about how we have some option years coming up. We are exploring the idea of more in-house capabilities that would inherently have a bit more flexibility with them, but and we have a update on that a little bit later too. But those are all things that we're trying to explore and trying to understand again what our timelines and flexibilities could be if we have to quickly get into these discussions.
Anyone else? Okay, Devin, I think we can move to the next slide.
Okay, great. So we have a series of organizational updates for you. We're going to start off with our current budget picture, which again looks great right now, but as we just talked about, the future is painting a very different picture, and then we have a few project updates as well. So for the financial updates, I'm going to turn it to Heather Lemon, our Chief Financial and Administrative Officer. Heather.
Thanks, Devin. Good afternoon, everyone. So I do have some positive information to go over here today with our recap of our calendar year 2024 budget year, and we actually just wrapped up or our independent auditor just wrapped up their audit, and we're going to be posting the results of that out on our website shortly as soon as we have the finalized documents. But one important thing to mention that we again did not have any findings, and it was a completely clean audit. So we're, very, very pleased with that. So since we've seen the draft of the audit documents, I was able to pull this recap together for you with the numbers, the finalized numbers in it. So I'm just going to start up at the top left-hand side. Our net position coming into the fiscal year was around 73 million. And then as far as the revenue side goes, we had, between the user fees, the federal receipts, and the treasury interest, we brought in around 121 million, which was actually above what we had originally projected. As you can see, we were originally projecting it to come in around 106 million, 0.5. So we actually came in 14.4 above where we had originally anticipated. So that, of course, is great news. And then on the expense side, we came in under budget. We had budgeted between personnel, operations, and the reinsurance program, excuse me, around 103.2 million. And we actually came in at basically 86.8 million for a total under budget of 16.5 million. So just to point out, the vast majority of that variance was due to coming in, basically $14.8 million on the reinsurance program. So that contributed to the majority of the savings there. So the ending net position for 2024, once we pull all those and factor them in, 107,242,783. And then if we take the operational reserve out, that lets us with a remaining balance of around $32.2 million, which is actually right on target to what we had discussed with you guys back in October. So everything on here, really good news, strong financial position coming into 2024, strong financial position coming out. Does anybody have any questions on the 2024 recap? Okay, hearing none. So the next section, I'm not going to go through the individual slides here. Typically, our Q1 expense, especially on the expenditure side, is pretty low. It's the very beginning of the year, so it takes a little while for our vendors to get their invoices in and actually draw down on the funds. So overall for the quarter, we brought in around 30.6 million, and on the expense side, we had 9.3 in expenditures. Next slide, please. And this slide here just represents it's pretty much the same information on the other slide, just showing the difference on the budget side of things. So we came in under budget of about 679,000, which is equivalent to 7%. Now, most of the variance here is on the personnel side. We had quite a few vacancies that we've been really working on trying to fill and get some new employees in. We've actually hired 6 new employees since last fall, and we're currently recruiting for 3 positions and have 4 upcoming job postings. So hopefully over the next quarter or 2, we should, once we have those employees in, then we'll be more on track with the spend on the personnel side. And as far as the operational variance goes, there are just some expenses that came in a little less than what we had originally anticipated. Any questions on Q1 budget? Okay, on the revenue side, so we brought in 27.6 million, which the original projected amount was 26.3 million. So we actually came in about 5% higher on the revenue side. Next slide. On this slide here, I just wanted to show you a little bit of a comparison of where we are now versus where we were at this time last year. So you can see revenue earned, we're 13% higher than where we were first quarter last year. Expenses incurred were a little under where we were last year, 2%. Then budget, we have just a variance of 244,000. Let's see. So we, again, we're in an excellent financial position for Q1. We are higher on the revenue side and a little lower on the expense side. So still in a great financial situation here for Q1. Okay. Any questions on that before I get into this information here? Okay. So what we wanted to talk to you about today, as Devin mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, so the 2025 budget increase is needed to cover the difference in the reinsurance contribution. So the amount when we met with you last fall when we were presenting the budget, it was estimated to come in around 44.4 million. Which that actually does include some operational expense costs for for PID. But we recently received an update from PID that the total amount needed actually came in higher than originally estimated, and the additional funding that's needed is basically 2.1 million. So if approved, that would bring our total amount budgeted for calendar year 2025 for the insurance program would be 46,552,185. So the recommendation is to approve the additional funding amount of the 2,152,185 for the reinsurance program in the calendar year 2025 budget.
Anybody have any questions? I know we'll need a motion, but before we get there, any questions? Tia?
Just a question, and it may be, I just need a high level explanation here about what is included in these, the reinsurance program when it comes to the expenses. So what technically is the request for the additional funding for?
That's the money that comes from Pennie to PID to combine with the federal pass-through monies to pay the insurers their reinsurance amounts for the claims year.
Right. So have those, I'm assuming those have increased just like everything else, but is that something that's anticipated in the following years?
And this gets a little bit to Devin's point a little earlier. It's the reinsurance year is really tricky. We just put out the parameters this year. So these last few weeks in April, May of 2025 for the 2026 year that isn't paid until 2027. So we try to go and we model out some of these operational expenses that are on this slide for PID are the modeling. We work with Oliver Wyman to try to and do data calls with insurers to try to anticipate what expenses will look like for the upcoming year, and then try to map where we think the reinsurance program should be. And then we work with Devin on kind of what kind of amounts to expect as part of the state contribution to make up that full reinsurance pool that goes back to the insurers. So I think in recent years, there's been we haven't been as close in what we estimated versus what became actual based on how the claims year played out. I think that's what one of the prior slides shows. It was off by 14 million. I think this year we're starting to get to what hopefully is more normal. And I think each of the hard part too is each of the 5 years Pennie has been in existence, there's been, it feels like almost something tricky or outside of what was originally anticipated happened, like COVID, and then like the federal government changing how the calculations work post-COVID. So I think that's partly contributing to the difference in estimate versus reality. And now this one is just, in this case, we were really close, but the cost was a little bit higher. So as we pair what we get, the defined amount from the federal government after they do their math, it meant we needed $2 million more from Pennie to make good on the reinsurance payments back to the companies.
Okay, thanks.
And luckily we have the reserve to be able to cover these types of things.
Right. Other questions for Heather? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion to approve the additional funding amount of a little over 2.1 million for the reinsurance program.
Joel Hopkins, so moved.
Joel moves. Looking for a second.
This is Cheryl. I second.
Cheryl will second. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Devin, I know there was another operational or organizational update that I think we wanted to provide.
Yep, we have a couple more updates. So for this one, we'll turn it to Rob, our Chief Operating Officer.
Hello again. So we are still developing our business case analysis to determine which contact center option is best for us and for our customers, after 2026. So Cheryl, to answer one of the questions that you had asked first, how it currently works is our contract is, the base contract is structured through December 31st, 2026. So when we were putting together the business case analysis, we're really looking at what would happen starting January 1st, 2027, and which option would be best. So just as a refresher, the options that we're evaluating is first, whether we should exercise option years with our current vendor. Two, if we should build an in-house contact center, or the third option being, should we issue a request for proposal for contact center services? The update that we want to provide today, because we're still undergoing the analyses right now to see which is most flexible, where we could see cost savings, quality improvements, things like that. But the update that we want to provide today was that since our March board meeting, our contact center vendor has suggested a potential fourth option that we could try to evaluate. So this option, we have not yet included it amongst the other three. It's still in a very early discussion, but essentially what it would allow us to do is amend our current existing contract, even starting with plan year 2026, if necessary. And it would build in different flexibilities and control over certain components within the contact center. And those components could be like quality, training, having some of the CSRs brought in-house. A portion of them, we'd still have to discuss what that amount would look like. And essentially what would happen is we would see cost reductions in the contracted costs, and those would be absorbed by us to take on some of those components for the contact center directly. So this would theoretically allow us to gauge the effectiveness and the improvements that we could see from having direct oversight over these functions and components. And it would also allow us to incrementally either expand or retract how much of the work we chose to undertake directly. And I want to really emphasize this is still very early in discussions. We don't have a great deal of details about what this would look like yet, but we wanted to provide this update along with the key considerations that we're kind of looking at when determining whether or not we add this as a fourth option to our business case analysis, in addition to the three that we just mentioned. And those key considerations are really cost, quality, timeliness, and viability. So for costs, first and foremost, I think the starting point would be, obviously we wouldn't want any additional costs to be brought on to Pennie as part of this hybrid approach if we were to go in that direction. But also, Cheryl, I think you brought up a great point too. When we're doing the business case analysis, which of the potential options that we're going to suggest leaves us with the most flexibility. So if we did need to see cost savings because we saw enrollment decreases, things like that, we'd be able to be flexible enough to make those changes. In terms of quality, that's still one of our primary focus areas alongside cost, and we really want to see plans for improvements towards our quality concerns that we've had, and we want those plans to be articulated, actionable, and also measurable. The other key consideration that we have is timeliness. So, we're not trying to rush the business case analysis, but we do want to complete that as early as possible so that we can take advantage of any flexibilities, especially around cost in the uncertainties that we currently face. So because of that, we would want these discussions with our vendor to really be concluded within the next couple months to see what the option would actually look like. And that would lead into the fourth and final key consideration, which is viability. And essentially this type of hybrid approach, if we were to include it in our business case analysis, or if we were to ultimately go in that direction, it would come with added complexities because there'd be the need for coordination between Pennie staff and with our contract center staff. Additionally, there would be the need to have structured components within it so that it shows that there's added value and that it anticipates and resolves any coordination issues and demonstrates feasibility, including a full cost breakdown that would show that it's actually feasible from our perspective to take on this type of undertaking, knowing that we might be seeing concurrent decreases in enrollments while we would be taking on this type of work. So we'll have additional information in the coming months, but we want to just add this to your consideration because you might see that when we actually present our business case, there might be a fourth option that has appeared if it meets each of these four considerations. And then we would run it against the other three options to see what is the best option for us from a cost, quality, and all the other perspectives that need to be taken. So does anyone have any questions about this update?
Yeah, Rob, when do you anticipate us having enough information to make a decision? Trying to figure that schedule out with the uncertainty in Washington to see which comes first type of thing.
And so we're trying to target to have the full business case analysis done internally in really July. The reason being we'd want to circulate that with the board as early as possible, probably looking at August, September for an October board meeting vote. And Devin, please step in if to keep me honest if you disagree with that timeline, but I think that's what we're still shooting for.
Yeah, I think our plan would be to provide that kind of full business case earlier than we normally provide materials, really to give the board time to do pre-review, ask questions. So maybe we would have some informational sessions on it or share that. I think we would really be shooting for the August timeframe so that we could start kind of introducing the different areas, see if there's anything else we would need to add into that. And then ideally, we would be trying to incorporate that as part of the October meeting, as Rob mentioned. And I think the October meeting would also it's typically our budget meeting. And so I think it would be kind of holistically part of that discussion around how we try to prepare Pennie for whatever's coming in 2026.
Is there a possibility, Devin, that we would get there, and since we wouldn't know enough yet about what may be coming out of Washington, that we would postpone it to a future meeting? We don't need to decide in October, do we? Or is there a drop dead date that we would have to decide by?
I think there's a few different timing scenarios that could play out, depending, because we, as Rob mentioned, kind of have option years that would start. And so I think at certain points, it kind of leaves us into continuing until we make a decision to do something different, continuing as is. But I would say, I think while budget is a clear and driving force, especially right now, the quality aspect is also one that we are very focused on. So, even absent any changes, I think the discussion may still point to a certain solution, even if we think we are going to have, budget sustainability moving forward, even based on the other factors as well that we're evaluating.
I thought I saw a question. Did someone, Tia, go ahead.
Yes. So with this new option 4 that's coming about, is that the only one that would be able to be implemented for 2026 potentially?
So potentially there's also, and so I will say we haven't discussed this directly with our contact center vendor yet, but potentially the option years conversation could include amendments as well, right? So like if we ever were to exercise the first option on this list, it's weird to say option and optioneers in the same thing, but if we were to exercise the first option on our list, which is exercising optioneers with our contractor, at that point, there could be potential for amendments being made. So, part of the negotiation might be, if we exercise 2 optioneers, would we see X, Y, or Z done in 2026? So there is still the potential for those types of changes to happen, but as it's currently structured, it would most likely only apply to this 4th option to you.
Okay, I just know we're, just as the commissioner mentioned, with everything going on potentially toward the end of the year, this is something that is vital. If enrollment goes down to 45 days and all of the other things taking place, the contact center will be the first point of contact for consumers who are confused or have questions. So the quality that we discussed is paramount. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yep, I agree. And to your point, with the shortened open enrollment period too, we would probably want as many people coming in to evaluate their plans to make sure it's still the most cost-effective plan for them too. So it'd be not only the quality, but there's also going to be a large volume of calls. It's probably going to be larger than previous years in such a tight turnaround time.
Other questions for Rob or Devin?
Thank you. And then I'll turn it over to Chachi for a report on the Brokers Project.
Thanks and good afternoon, Board of Directors, fellow Pennie team. I was going to give an update here on a project that we did that surrounded the brokers and putting a nice little bow around the project as well. So this is more of a summary of a forthcoming report that we'll be putting out soon. It was really targeted around our broker base, but I just wanted to kind of ground set real quick and just remind everybody on the call that, when we're talking about reaching the uninsured, that's our main focus, is understanding the uninsured, providing the highest level of support, and that includes, finding out where do they live, why are they uninsured, what barriers do they have to coverage, the trusted voices in their community, and as well as their demographics. So with the uninsured, we've talked about this in the past, we're trying to do 2 major goals: raise the awareness of Pennie, and then get them the local one-on-one support that our research is really showing that they're asking for. So starting in 2023, we kind of took that lens of how are we, what's the makeup of our uninsured, and put that lens more toward the broker population. So who are our Pennsylvania health brokers? Who are we missing? And how can we expand coverage opportunities through them? So what we learned in kind of developing the scope of this project is that, that none of our state partners, insurers, brokerages were really performing a demographic survey on Pennsylvania health brokers so that we could at least get a baseline of where we're at, so that we could either improve or fill gaps. And that's really what we tried to do as one part of this project. And since nobody else was doing it, we're kind of in that unique, unbiased position to be able to gather that data. And then hopefully we were able to kind of show, also grow the broker base by showing Pennsylvania brokers with a health line of authority that Pennie was a good option for rounding out their book of business. So we can jump to the next slide. This kind of shows some of the data that we were able to pull from that demographic survey. So this was an optional broker demographic survey that's embedded at the end of the broker certification training. And what we learned from this survey is that we're pretty aligned with the Pennsylvania uninsured population. There are some gaps that we absolutely see that we could fill, but along the left is the category, the responses to the broker survey in the second column. The third column is our current Pennie enrollees. The third column is SHADE Act data, at the most recent SHADE Act data that we were able to have from as of 2024, and then broad demographics of the total PA population. So we're fairly aligned with the age demographic, certainly with how many brokers are between the ages of 45 and 64, and with our Pennie enrollees, but there's certainly a gap there when it comes to under 45. So it would be great for us to see some more younger brokers to be able to help out the PA uninsured, which tends to skew more young. Also, we're fairly aligned if we look at the second column and the third column with Black or African American brokers and brokers speaking Spanish or Hispanic. As you can see, those numbers are fairly close. We do see some kind of blind spots in that data that it potentially could be more out of state brokers that might be skewing those numbers. And that's something that we're going to try to fix by updating the survey moving forward. This is a survey that we'll be doing more in as an ongoing basis to kind of keep updating the data. So there's some gaps in the survey that we noticed that we're going to be able to kind of fix moving forward. And then the other, go ahead.
Chachi, quick question along those lines. What was our completion rate for the demographic questions? Do you know?
For the total response rate is there's 4,200. It was over 4,200.
Is that the majority of those that did the rest of the survey? Because I know this part was optional. Okay.
It was optional, but we kind of made it seem like it wasn't. So they could have kind of scooted right through it, but made it so that it was it kind of made it seem like it was part of the certification. So we had over 5,000 certified brokers and 4,200 completed the survey. So it's a really good sample.
Yeah, that's great.
Another kind of a update that we want to fix on that survey is where these brokers are serving folks. Because on the next slide, there it is we had the statewide option, and it was also, you could choose multiple areas of the state. So another part there on covering rural uninsured is how can we try to get a better look at where brokers are specifically and what parts of the state that they're serving. So this is one part that we're hoping to sew up as well. But another gap is certainly getting more Pennsylvania resident brokers in rural Pennsylvania.
Do you know
okay,
what the breakdown is of resident versus non-resident broker on the Pennie?
Just overall. Is that what you mean?
Just overall.
Yeah, it's I thought I had that number. I'll get back to you on a specific number. I'll probably have it by the end of the meeting for sure.
Just more curious than anything else on how many are. I mean, in an ideal world, it's in person or someone close to you, but certainly we know we have non-residents that come in.
Exactly, and I think that my later slide actually has that too.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's more on that number's more on the new certified and how many are Pennsylvania based, but I can get that number for you for sure. So another piece of this broker project was getting more brokers and recruiting more brokers. So in 2023, when we kind of kicked off this project, we did a pilot of trying to recruit specifically brokers with a health line of authority that weren't yet Pennie certified. So we went after 4 highly uninsured zip codes in Philadelphia, and that effort got us 50 new certified broker certifications. And then last year, we kind of expanded it out to Philadelphia County as a whole, and we were able to add 92 more brokers there. And out of those 92, 72 brokers were connected to, that number is, I'm losing it too. I don't want to give the wrong number, but it led to, it was right around 1,700 enrollments. So really trying to but also recruit more brokers into Pennie and trying to round out that business. And how did we do that? We were really engaging with chambers of commerce, small business development centers, have a really great relationship with them, the insurance associations, different brokerages. We held some webinars. We ran some paid media over LinkedIn to really try to bring in more brokers that have that health line. Any other questions before I kind of jump into the next slide, which shows us a little bit too of the comparison year over year of newly certified brokers. And I will say that there's throughout this project, we were able to identify different ways that we could improve collecting data. And one of which was the data that we were collecting on brokers. We're able to kind of refine it. So we have some blind spots from 22, 23 that we're now going to be able to kind of monitor moving forward with the past 2 years and years to come. So what really overall, what we found here was that if we can really put the effort in to recruit more brokers, that we can move the needle. Is this a little, I mean, we also have to show that, hey, if coverage is more affordable, more people are going to enroll, brokers are going to identify that more people want to enroll and kind of jump into the mix as well. So I feel that we have to give due credit to the enhanced premium tax credits here as well. But early 22, 23, hovering right around 3,700, 4,000, jumped up to almost 4,500 brokers. And then for this year, we have over 5,600 brokers. And as the breakout there it is, 65% PA residents out of that. And then we had our biggest jump in new certification brokers come in with just a little over 1,100 new brokers into Pennie. So this represents the highest broker participation since our launch. And it was really driven by some targeted outreach, definitely the enhanced premium tax credits, some more broker support from our end, and marketing the value of becoming Pennie certified. Also, free training probably helped as well. And so the next slide shows, I've already kind of talked to what gaps are there. So want to update our survey, capture more geographic data, capture some more broker-specific data, and then kind of overlap that with our uninsured outreach. What we're seeing right now is our broker base is relatively representative of Pennsylvania's uninsured. Definitely still some gaps in southeastern PA, but we see younger brokers, rural regions, and kind of going back to how I started with our mission of raising awareness and getting more help through PA. Our time, energy, focus, our resources really going to be focused this year and parts of next year too of really building out that new assister network. And I think that if we take the time and energy to really build out the regionalized assister network, that it's also going to help us in the broker realm as well, just being that those regional organizations are going to be able to make some strong connections with brokers in their community. So it's a nice warm handoff from assister to broker.
Chachi, have we ever followed up? I know we had I forget, there was a significant number of recertifications. Do we ever follow up with those that do not? Not an exit interview per se, but just to find out, hey, why didn't you come back for this year type of thing? I mean, maybe they just gave up the license entirely. Maybe they moved to something else. But is that something that we would consider doing, or is there value in doing something like that?
I think certainly just to be able to collect. I mean, we collect that information when someone disenrolls from Penny as an actual customer. So it would be interesting to find out why a broker doesn't want to recertify. That would definitely give us a nice rounded out view and potentially areas where we could improve.
Just something to think about. Any
Mhm.
other questions for Chachi on the slides up until this point? Okay. Are you still
No.
some more slides?
Nope, that was it. That was it for me. I'll pass it over to Anna Polina.
Yes, thank you. Next slide, please. So this year, one of our goals was to revamp the agreement that Pennie has with brokers that use our platform or that sell qualified plans through Pennie by assisting people who are interested in buying our plans or are actively looking to buy plans. Our goal was to increase consumer protections and clearly delineate the obligations that brokers have towards consumers and enhance Pennie's ability to terminate the agreement if a broker engages in conduct that it is prohibited. We wanted to make sure that Pennie brokers adhere to the highest standards and also that they provide quality services to people enrolled in Pennie and to people who are interested in learning more about Pennie. Next slide, please. Under federal regulations, for a broker to be able to enroll people in a qualified health plan through Pennie, they must enter into an agreement with the state-based exchange, and the broker has to comply with the terms of that agreement. The minimum standards that the agreement must have is a requirement to register with the state-based exchange. Also, they have to receive training regarding qualified health plans and insurance affordability programs. And also they have to comply with the state and federal privacy and security standards. And again, these are minimum standards and SBEs have the authority to include additional requirements. Pennie has had an agreement with brokers since we started. However, we wanted to revise it to include additional protections for consumers that are only applicable to federally facilitated marketplaces. We also wanted to clearly delineate the obligations that brokers have towards Pennie consumers and conduct that is strictly prohibited. Finally, we also wanted to clarify the language in the agreement and organizing it in a manner that makes it more readable to brokers. Next slide. So I'm just going to give you a quick summary of the main changes in the agreement. Pennie requires brokers to be licensed as insurance producers in order to register with Pennie and to undergo our certification training in order to be able to use our platform. We formalize those requirements in the agreement. So that is a really good change that formalizes what the requirements are. We also organize the agreement by having separate sections. We have the terms and conditions to use Pennie's platform, privacy and security standards, Pennie's trademark licensing acknowledgement, which was a separate agreement, and also the Commonwealth standards terms and conditions. The terms and conditions to use Pennie's platform section. To me, I believe that this is one of the most important sections because it clearly delineates the responsibilities that brokers have towards Pennie customers. It adopts the federal facilitated exchange standards of conduct, and also it includes penalties. The agreement specifically sets forth brokers' obligations towards consumers and Pennie, and also the type of conduct that is prohibited. For example, in the amended agreement, brokers are required to provide consumers with correct information without omission of material fact regarding a qualified health plan and other financial assistance. They're also required to provide Pennie with correct information about eligibility determinations and make sure that they document that information. Brokers are not allowed to engage in marketing or conduct that is misleading or coercive. And they are also required to protect consumers' personal information. This is just a brief example of the enhanced consumer protections that we are adopting.
This section also adopts from the federally facilitated exchange the standards for termination and suspension for cause and the redetermination process. For example, if we receive allegations that a broker enrolled a person without their permission, we would investigate the allegations and start the termination process. We would also notify the broker and give them the opportunity to explain the situation and provide any evidence that they may have. Depending on the specifics of each case and the evidence, Pennie may terminate the agreement with the broker, or we may dismiss the allegations. This process also follows the protections afforded under Pennsylvania administrative law. Another enhancement is the adoption of penalties other than termination of the agreement. And again, this section mimics the protections afforded for consumers using the federally facilitated exchanges. For example, under the agreement, Pennie can take reciprocal action if another SVM or FFM terminates their agreement with a broker due to misconduct. Pennie could also prohibit a broker from registering with us in the future if they engage in misconduct and had their agreement terminated. So these enhanced provisions really follow the protections that are afforded to consumers using the federally facilitated marketplaces. They were not available for state-based exchanges, but state-based exchanges have the ability and the authority to adopt those measures as well. And we believe this is in the best interest of Pennsylvania consumers. Also under this new agreement, the privacy and security standards and the trademark licensing acknowledgement each have their own separate section. We strengthen the existing standards and we also clarify the language so it is easier to understand and to follow. Next slide, please. I think the one before. That one. Oh, next. Thank you. So when we were revamping this existing agreement, we had two main goals in mind. Turning a document that was full of legalese into a document that was actually easier to read by simplifying the language and organizing it in sections. This change will make it easier for brokers to read and understand. The second goal, and to me the most significant, to be honest, was to enhance the current protections that we had for consumers, and also to add additional protections by implementing what is required by federal regulations in federally facilitated marketplaces. We believe that these enhancements will really benefit both brokers and consumers, and we're just asking to adopt these changes. Any questions or any comments?
Yeah, this is Cheryl. Is this generally something the board would have to approve, number one? And if so, could we see, it's hard to kind of, I mean, it sounds like all the changes are really positive and will help consumers, but it would be helpful to actually see the agreement if we're going to be asked approve,
Sure,
to approve it. And then, but part one of the question is this really something a board has to approve?
We believe, and we had that discussion internally, this agreement, basically we are adopting the standards that are available for facilitated, federal facilitated marketplaces. So we want to make sure that because of the board, basically they're the ones governing Pennie, that they give us the authority to actually adopt these new measures. And we would be more than happy to share the draft agreement.
Well, that would be helpful for me. I don't know if anybody else wants to see it before they approve it.
Yep, I think it makes sense. It's Alexis.
And what is the timeline? Is this something we're just trying to do ahead of open enrollment so we could push approval, or kind of?
Sure. So that's actually, yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. That is actually a very good question. So our goal was to have the new agreement in place before we train the new brokers for the next open enrollment. They have to take the training, I believe, starting in August. And when they take the training, they would also be able to read and sign the agreement. Our goal is to have that ready before the training starts.
Okay, but that would be before our next meeting.
That is correct.
So if we wanted an opportunity, and I think board members do, to look at it, what would be the best way? I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to try to schedule an emergency 30-minute board meeting unless people have some objections and we need to talk about it. But how can we move both kind of simultaneously in terms of, I mean, maybe it's, and we're voting conceptually to, I guess we would approve it electronically. Could we
The vote
move
needs-
today to approve an electronic approval of this after we review it? Or I guess what are our options?
Sure, the vote has to take place in a public session per the Sunshine Act. So the vote would need to take place in public. I would be happy to send the agreement if that's what the board wants. And I guess the next step would be to schedule just a quick voting session.
This is Cheryl again, not to beat a dead horse, but have we approved, I know this is an important agreement, but so is the member services agreement that we have and the IT agreements. Do we approve other agreements?
No, and the reason why we want to make sure that this has board agreement, board approval, is because of the termination sections that we have. We want to make sure that the board approves the process. It is a process where basically we would be taking official action against a broker that engages in misconduct. And also the federal policies that are just available for the federally facilitated marketplace. The other requirements are requirements under federal regulations that are applicable to both FFMs and SVMs. Yes, I see a hand, Joel.
Yes, I wouldn't mind seeing it. I don't want, and I'm not sure if this was what was discussed, but I don't want us to get down into the weeds of the management and wordsmithing and things like that. I think you've certainly conveyed the changes. So I'm not sure how that plays into your procedure, but I guess I want to convey it's really not our role to get down into commas, periods, and T's.
I totally agree with that's not what I'm asking for. I don't know if that was directed toward me. I don't think we should either. That's why I'm questioning whether it's something we have to approve at all.
As I mentioned before, because the board governs the operations of Pennie, and we are adopting regulations and protections that are afforded only in the federally facilitated marketplace, and they are not explicit provided for SVMs. We believe that in order to be able to fully enforce this, we would need the board vote to make sure that we can adopt those measures that currently are not available to SVMs.
Well, Anna, we didn't approve the current broker agreement, right?
No, and it didn't include it didn't include the protections that are available through the federal facilitated marketplace. It had just basically the basic requirements under the regs that apply to both SVMs and FFMs.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to, couldn't we just, I mean, conceptually we're agreeing with what you're doing short of a vote, I guess, per se. Like, I mean, the board, I think, agrees that Pennie should be able to terminate a broker that violates a broker agreement. Right? Like, is that the question? Like that seems to be the difference.
Is that, and to also adopt these additional protections that we have not had before because they are specific to FFMs.
So, I mean, I think at least from the members that you've heard from, I mean, I think there's consensus that yes, we we do think Pennie should adopt additional protections, but, and we'd love to see what they are, but don't necessarily think that we need to get into the specifics on how, like we don't in other areas of what we oversee in terms of Pennie operations. Does that make sense? Sorry, Joel, I think I saw your hand go up.
You did, and you said exactly what I was thinking. I guess to say that.
So I guess I just.
Just to say that in a different way, I mean, we can certainly support and approve the general direction without getting into, hey, we approve that specific language.
This is Colleen. I guess that's what I thought we were doing, but I know there's been the ask to look at the language. So I'm trying to balance the comments here. I think what Pennie's put together is an overview of the provisions that they're going to address within the contract. But do we need to hold a vote until folks have had a chance to review the actual language?
I'm one that said I'd like to see it, but I don't. That was really more of a curiosity. Gee, here's how it all played out. As far as moving forward and getting it approved, I think what's been laid out in front of us is sufficient. It's directional. It's at the right level. It says, here's what we're doing and why. Here are the changes that are going to be made and why.
And it's Alexis. I guess I'd say if it follows national, I think I'm fine with it, or federal, I'm fine with it too, because we're already kind of set up to interact with federal exchanges. So, and I just checked to make sure it didn't mean we had to make any adjustments to our contracts with brokers, and it doesn't. So I guess I'm okay with that too. If there was something that fell outside the federal guidelines and was something new specific to Pennie, I probably would want more insight.
This is Antoinette. So it seems like you're just asking us to vote to approve the federal language, understanding that it provides additional protections, and Pennie would have the option then to terminate contracts, I think, right? Like, so I think if that's the ask, I'm fine with that. I would like to see the language too, but I don't think that precludes me from wanting to vote right now.
So I'm hearing
Yeah,
maybe oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Cheryl. Yeah, I could go along with that as well, but I think in the future, to the extent we're going to be asked to approve an agreement, we should get a chance to see it in advance. But I could go along with that, what others are saying for this instance.
And I would just say too, just some clarity that Pennie doesn't need to approve every agreement, right? Because I think it feels like
That
we're
is
also now
correct.
setting up a precedent that we have to approve
No, that is
everything. So I think
correct.
just clarity. Yeah.
That is correct, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. The only reason why we are presenting these to the board is just to make sure that we have the clear authority to terminate the agreement with the new enhanced protections, because we are in fact adopting provisions that are not strictly available to SBMs unless they make that decision. These protections are afforded to consumers who use federally facilitated marketplaces. And we need the authority of the board to adopt those new provisions.
And I think we obviously want to be able to take the action under established process if we are seeing the inappropriate fraudulent behavior. And I think what we want to avoid is getting into that situation and having authority be a question. So I think just having the clear record that we were directed and approved to have a determination process would just allow it to be very clean from that perspective. I think
and that termination process is consistent with the federal process, right?
It is consistent with the federal process and also adopting, because we have to follow the Pennsylvania administrative process.
Right, which is, yeah, even more process than what the federal government would provide.
It offers
Right.
more due process protections. That is correct.
Yeah, it takes a little bit. Uh-huh.
So it sounds like I'm hearing that there's comfort with adopting federal broker standards and a termination process that is consistent with federal and state rules as sort of a directional approval. And then I think what we could do is share the agreement after the fact for people after this meeting for people to review. And if there are questions around specific pieces of it, then, we can handle those directly if there's any concerns about any specific language. And then if anything boils up from that, we could bring that back to a future meeting. But I think that way we could have the directional approval established, and then, for anyone interested, curiosity, or, if anyone sees any flags, we can continue to work on those moving forward.
Yeah, I think you have the consent of the board to move forward as proposed and to share the actual language with board members between now and the next meeting. And don't think that we need to go further into a vote unless anybody wants to go further than that. But I think we're all on the same page and understanding and want what's best for the consumer in this case, and that's continuing to strengthen and align our broker agreement procedures. So I think that can be reflected in the minutes, and we can move on. Does that make sense? Any other questions or objections to that? Devin, Anna, are you comfortable enough documenting it for purposes of the minutes that the board has shown consensus support for moving forward with the revisions? Okay.
As long as it's documented, that works for us. Thank you.
Document it and share it. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. What's next?
So we have a couple of updates on some of the projects that we have underway for this year. So for that, I'm going to turn it to David.
Thanks, Devin. Yep, I'm going to provide a couple of updates on our strategic projects. A previous board meeting, we discussed our pursuit of a new state income data source to use as a secondary income data source to verify customer income with the Department of Labor and Industry. Currently, we use the IRS for our primary income data source, where customer income information cannot be verified. We do a real-time check with Equifax, utilizing the verification of current income check. Last summer, CMS changed the rules to where the costs are now being borne by states and are slated to increase annually. So we have been simultaneously working with L&I to deploy the quarterly wage data as a secondary income check as part of our June release next month. And we are slated to begin testing between Pennie and the Department of Labor and Industry later this month. So as a reminder, we're going to deploy this solution in two different ways. First is we're going to do a monthly income verification check. So these monthly quarterly wage data reports would verify income for individuals who the IRS is not able to verify their income, but we would, instead of going to Equifax, we would ship these folks over to Labor and Industry to see if they can verify their income electronically without creating a data matching issue. And then we also will be using this during our auto renewal processing. So obviously auto renewals, everyone receiving advanced premium tax credits from the previous year is evaluated for eligibility for the next year. Quarterly wage data would be, again, a secondary source of income verification. We would still, for this coming up in enrollment, we would still like to use the Equifax source as a tertiary check to reduce any risk associated with the new implementation. But yeah, so the idea would be during kind of the non-open enrollment months, we would do a monthly income verification of new customers whose income we could not verify, plus, and then during auto renewals, this would be part of the auto renewal process. And really, we kind of want to hang on to the Equifax check to the end of the year, given the anticipated changes coming to the program integrity rule. We feel like any additional opportunities to electronically verify customer income will help and hopefully reduce administrative burden on our customers that we expect to increase should that proposed rule become final. And then we would completely jettison the Equifax check in early 2026. Next slide. So why are we pursuing this? First reason really, and this is kind of a table of the benefits of utilizing the quarterly wage data. The first benefit is really cost. This is a low fixed monthly cost after startup. So we pay the initial for the initial cost to create the program, and then after that, labor and industry is charging us a nominal $100 fee per month, regardless of the run. Regardless of how many data elements we're asking for, it's going to be the same monthly cost. Compare that with Equifax, where it's a per transaction cost. So literally, the more Equifax benefits us, the more income it can verify, the more we pay, and that transaction cost is slated to increase year over year pretty significantly. The income data available with quarterly wage data is the previous 4 quarters of available wage data. So not only are we getting kind of a snapshot at time, we're able to get a complete financial picture for our customers. So that gives additional opportunities for us to verify customer income, especially for those members who maybe they have seasonal employment, maybe they get Social Security. This will help kind of smooth out their year's finances. Compare that to Equifax, where we get one point in time piece of data, and if it doesn't match up with what the customer has attested to, then too bad. We create the data matching issue. Utilizing the quarterly wage data also gives us the ability to recheck income. So if we create an income data matching issue, because the IRS can't verify it, we have the ability to recheck customer income data to allow ourselves to have a more recent quarterly wage data. So if let's say they have a data matching issue and they have 90 days to clear it, first month maybe we don't have the most recent quarterly wage data, we run them again. The next month we do have it. We're able to verify our income with that check. We can automatically verify them. As opposed to Equifax, we have no ability to recheck. It happens once and that's it. Pennie access to data. With quarterly wage data, we have a window into that data. We can spot check. We can make sure that things are, things are running smoothly, successfully, and that our systems are working together. Equifax is a black box right now. We don't know the inputs. We kind of see the outputs, but we have no ability to kind of to see what's going on in there. Quarterly wage data gives us an opportunity to look at that and make sure we understand what's going on. So kind of go back to the cost. As I mentioned, quarterly wage data is only $100 per month, regardless of the number of transactions. Equifax is a per transaction cost. That over time will result in substantial savings. So for reference, during kind of the non-open enrollment or SEP months, utilizing Equifax has cost us a little over $20,000 per month. But during auto renewals, that cost rises significantly. This past open enrollment, it was $162,000 and change. And this is actually under budget. That's not a good thing because that means it did not do as well as we had anticipated. So less customers had their income verified by Equifax, and so we spent less money on it. And then by 2028, just to illustrate, each Equifax transaction will cost nearly $10 compared to $5.76 now. and then and just so between July and now and March, when CMS started charging states to use this service, Pennie has received 55,501 transactions from Equifax. So over the next 5 years, just utilizing current usage of Equifax, we estimate that we'll be able to save up to $1 million in operational costs over this time period. Additionally, because of all the advantages of utilizing quarterly wage data, we expect that this will reduce administrative burden for customers substantially as well, and will give us a better window into the data that we're getting. Any questions on quarterly wage data?
David, so we propose to use it for the rest of this year, and then we'd stop in the first quarter of next year, or?
Yeah, that's the idea. And then
Okay.
I think my understanding is that I think in the first board meeting of next year, we would vote to remove Equifax from kind of our income data sources.
Other questions for David? Tia?
So with the checks being done quarterly, will there be systems in place to ensure that there aren't DMIs for people like gig workers?
Yeah, so the checks will happen monthly, but it takes quarterly data. So in
Right.
Pennsylvania, each Pennsylvania employer submits their wage data for each quarter of the year. We're checking that monthly. The vast majority of employers produce, the previous quarterly wage data is available a month or two into the next quarter. Not always. So there's about 25% or so, I believe, of employers that sometimes post maybe a little later. So the monthly run accounts for that lag. So if we didn't get the most recent quarter for a customer, the next month we should be able to get it, and then it's possible that in that month, the more recent income information then is able to electronically verify that customer's income. And that is especially important for gig workers, seasonal workers, maybe people who receive a Social Security check once a year. Like, it's especially important for them because we're continuously checking their income to see if additional income is coming in that will allow us to verify what they've attested to.
Now, I'll just add that one difference between this data is that for all the reasons David mentioned, a lot of benefits to using it. We would work it into auto renewals to avoid the creation of data matching issues, but in real-time applications, it's not available real time. So the data matching issue might be created, but then this could clear it for the consumer without them having to provide documentation. So there's a little bit of an operational difference there, but ultimately we still think the benefits are considerable for both the consumer and our operations.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. So as she mentioned, if the IRS doesn't verify the income, the data matching issue is created. The customer has the opportunity to provide documentation. If they don't, by the time the next month's run happens, they're included in the next month. If they do provide it, then they're not.
Okay. Any other questions for David?
All right, next slide. So an update on everyone's favorite feature play display. We are on track to implement the feature play display project again with the June release ahead of open enrollment 2026. So we're deploying it in June. We'll not go live to customers until November 1st, but because of our kind of on the technical side, we have to deploy it in June. Currently, we are conducting focus groups and interviews with prospective customers and the uninsured to inform how this new tool will be presented. And in addition, we've shared key product information and timelines with insurers. We also been very deliberate in the data that we are collecting, and I believe you received this in advance on how we are going to measure the project success and make improvements in future years. So really the data that we're collecting are all about, do customers find value in the updated display? So for instance, one key question is, what impact did featured play display have on customer behavior? And the data that we're going to use to kind of answer this question are, what percentage of customers enrolled in a plan within the featured play display versus those that toggled out of it and back into all plans? Were customers more likely to actively plan shop compared to previous years? So active shoppers include both new enrollees as well as those who are auto-renewed and actively go in to shop. So they could re-enroll in their existing plan, but we could see that they have gone in, they've gone into plan shopping and actually looked for a new plan compared to previous years. And then another question is customer satisfaction. How many customers enrolled in a new plan for 2026 compared to previous years? And did those who enrolled in a plan using the featured plan display stay enrolled in that plan longer than those who did not? Other consumer behavior that we want to use this to monitor is any change in patterns overall in open enrollment versus special enrollment period enrollees. Did people who maybe come in for the first time, do they find it useful? Maybe they don't understand how the filters work. This helps filter those plans for them. This calls out certain plans that the all plan doesn't. Does this help them? Is there a difference in open enrollment, where we have a lot of passive renewals versus special enrollment periods where people have to actively shop for a plan? And then our new shoppers more inclined to enroll using a featured plan compared to current ones. So again, really, we're learning a lot on the perception of this new tool with these focus groups and interviews. We'll use that to continue to enhance the display of the new new display in plan shopping before it's deployed fully for open enrollment. And then, of course, what's post open enrollment and beyond, we're going to use this data to understand how customers are interacting with it and whether they find it useful. And that should provide insights for all of us as to how to best utilize this feature. That's really all I have about that.
So David, this will happen in real time, or is this a focus group?
So yeah, this is real-time data. So we are collecting it through kind of our internal SciSense data reporting. So in our usual course of data reporting, these are elements that we're also specifically asking Get Insured to pull, and that of course we'll be able to report out on. And then we're also using Google Analytics for some of these, more specifically to monitor how much time people are spending at the featured plan display, whether that's the screen that they're using to sign up for a plan. So a mix of kind of our internal data source, internal Pennie data that's collected, that we're already collecting, and then Google Analytics that will kind of allow for a little bit more insight into customer behavior. The focus groups that we will be having follow-up focus groups next year. That will allow us to there's going to be a lot of noise, obviously, in the data. There's a lot happening during open enrollment. Focus groups will allow us to better understand whether customer behavior changes are actually because of feature plan display, or maybe it was something else. Those focus groups will kind of provide additional context into why customers behave the way they did with the new display.
Okay. Any questions for David? Yep. Amy.
Yes, thank you for going over this. So can you share a little bit about what the focus group said, what kind of feedback you got on so far on the feature plan display?
Sure. So we had a focus group last night, and it was, we're still kind of, parsing through the notes. There's a lot to unpack. I think preliminarily, as someone who observed the session, I wasn't in the room, but I watched it online. There was a lot of really good engagement. I think people were happy to have additional information about the plans that they had to choose from, and kind of appreciated the additional kind of the automatic filtering that was done for them, and kind of the ways that this kind of levels the playing field. In terms of what customers will see on the first page. They did give us feedback on how to on the text of the page, how to maybe explain it, maybe how to make it a little bit more interactive. All things that I think we could take back and use to make improvements before it's fully deployed. And then, for those things that maybe are a little bit more, a little bit more technical in nature, that will give us, food for thought for future years.
Thank you.
Other questions for David? Okay. Devin, any closing thoughts or any closing comments, or did I miss an issue? I don't think I did.
Yeah, no, that's the full agenda we have for today. So, I think going back to where we started, really focusing on what is potentially coming down and the timing and all the moving pieces. A lot of uncertainty in what's coming up for the rest of this year. So, appreciate, I know we've had conversations with various teams across all the different stakeholders, and just look forward to continuing to do that, to keep our ears open on what's happening and how we can be in the best position to accommodate or adjust to those changes as they get finalized. But that's it for the agenda today.
Great. Any walk-on agenda or other business? Hearing none, I don't think anyone's ever complained about getting out a little early on a Friday. So thank you all for your participation today, and we'll stay in touch as this year is plans to be very busy. So thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.